So what exactly is a person? It sounds like a simple question, right? But in the eyes of the law, it's actually pretty profound. Today, we're going to take a journey through the legal life of a person under South African law, from how our rights are protected before we're even born to what happens, legally, when someone simply disappears.
You might think, well, obviously, I'm a person. Biologically, you're right. But legally, personhood is a very specific status. It has a clear beginning and a clear end. Think of it as the legal key that unlocks everything. Your ability to own property, to sign contracts, to have your rights protected. Without it, you're kind of sitting on the sidelines of society.
Okay, so to really get this, you need to understand one crucial distinction the law makes. On one side, you have the legal subject. That's the player in the game. It's you, a human, who can have rights and duties. On the other side, you've got the legal object. That's the stuff in the game, like a car or a house. It can be owned, but it can't do any owning itself. The whole law of persons is basically the rule book for the players.
So here's our game plan. First up, we'll nail down what a legal person actually is. Then, we're going to jump back in time to explore life before birth. From there, we'll get into the special rules for kids and teens, look at how an adult status can change, and finally, we'll cover the legal end of life. All right, let's dive right in. Section 1. Are you a person? Let's check out the legal blueprint.
So the law actually recognizes two kinds of persons. First, there's the natural person. Simple enough, right? That's you, me, every human being. But then, and this is where it gets a little mind-bending, you have the juristic person. This is basically a legal invention. It's an entity, like a company or a university, that the law decides to treat as if it were a person. It can own things and go to court, totally separate from the people who are part of it.
Now, for our second section, we're going to tackle a really fascinating legal puzzle. What happens before birth? And how does the law go about protecting the unborn?
Here's the deal. Legal personhood officially begins at birth, but that creates a potential problem, right? What if a will leaves an inheritance to a grandchild who hasn't been born yet? To solve this, the law came up with a really clever tool called the nasturus fiction. Nasturus is just Latin for one who is to be born. Now, the word fiction here doesn't mean it's a lie. It's more like a legal what-if scenario. The rule says if it benefits the child, we're going to act as if they were already born.
And a famous case, Ex parte Bodel Steenkamp, shows this perfectly. A grandfather left property to his grandkids who were alive at the time of my death. One of his daughters was pregnant, so the court used this legal fiction. It basically said, for the sake of fairness, we're going to pretend this child was already born, as long as it's to his advantage and he's later born alive. And boom, he could inherit. It's a powerful example of how flexible the law can be.
So, the main use for this legal fiction is definitely inheritance. It makes sure an unborn child doesn't get left out. But what about something like a prenatal injury, maybe from a car accident? For a while, people thought the fiction could be used here too. But today, the courts prefer to use the standard law of delict, which is just the legal term for a civil wrong, like negligence. The logic is pretty clear. While the injury might have happened before birth, the actual harm, the real-world damage, only shows up after the child is born and becomes a legal person.
Okay, so the child is born. They're officially a legal person, but that's when they enter a whole new stage. Let's move on to Section 3, the rules of youth and the unique legal world of a minor.
Right, so you're born, you're a legal person, but you can't just go out and sign a mortgage. And this isn't the law trying to be mean, it's the exact opposite. It's a shield. The law recognizes that young people might not have the experience or judgment for huge legal decisions, so it puts these protections in place to stop them from being exploited or making a really costly mistake.
This table gives a really great snapshot of what we're talking about. A minor can't just sign a major contract. Without a guardian's help, it can be canceled. But look at the nuances here. A mature minor, over 12, can actually consent to their own medical treatment. Now, for something really serious, like an operation, they still need a guardian to formally assist. And here's a fascinating one. A minor can get married with the right consents, but they are completely blocked from entering a civil union until they turn 18.
Turning 18 is a massive legal milestone, but it's not the only thing that can change a person's legal status. So let's jump into Section 4 and see what other factors can alter your legal standing, because believe me, it's not just about age.
Let's talk about domicile. That's your legal home, basically. Under the old common law, a married woman's domicile was automatically tied to her husband's. He moves, her legal home moves with him, no questions asked. Well, that was totally thrown out by the Domicile Act in 1992. Now, it's all about equality.
Anyone over 18 establishes their own domicile. Period.
So why the big change? This quote from the Constitutional Court explains it perfectly. It's all about a really important idea in South Africa's constitution called transformative constitutionalism. The goal isn't just to have rules on paper, it's to actively reshape the entire legal system to reflect modern values like dignity and equality. This principle is the engine that drives so much legal reform. And it goes beyond just age. Other things can change an adult's legal capacity. For example, a court can limit the ability of someone with a severe mental illness to sign contracts. There's also this really wild legal concept of a prodigal. This is someone who is so wasteful with their money that a court can actually step in and appoint someone else to manage their finances for them. And of course, insolvency also limits your legal status. In every case, the law is stepping in to protect people and their assets.
And that brings us to the end of our journey. Let's get into our final section, the final chapter, and how legal personhood officially comes to an end.
In most cases, the legal end of life is pretty clear-cut. It's proven with a death certificate. But for really complex medical situations, like organ donation, the law needs a much more precise standard. And in South Africa, that standard is brain death. This means that the irreversible end of all brain function is considered the legal point of death, even if a machine is keeping the heart beating.
But what about those truly tragic cases where someone just vanishes? There's no body, so there's no proof of death. How can their family ever move on, or how can their estate be settled? Well, the law has a very specific procedure to handle this exact situation.
Here's how it works. A family member applies to the High Court. The court then issues something called a rule nisi. You can think of it as a provisional order that sets a future date for a final decision. This order then gets published everywhere, newspapers, official government publications, to give anyone, including the missing person, a chance to respond. If that date comes and no one objects, the court makes the order final.
But an order presuming death isn't absolute. It's what we call a rebuttable presumption, which just means if the person were to miraculously return, the order gets canceled. Their estate can be divided up, but the court might make the heirs provide some kind of security just in case the assets need to be returned. And get this, the marriage isn't automatically over. The surviving spouse has to make a whole separate application to the court to have it officially dissolved.
So as you can see, our legal personhood is this really fundamental concept, but it's not just automatic. It's a carefully constructed journey. It's protected by legal fictions before we're born, it evolves as we grow, and it's concluded with very precise legal procedures, even when faced with the mystery of a disappearance.
And all of this leaves us with one final, fascinating question. The law has already stretched the definition of a person to include things like companies and to protect the unborn. As our technology and society keep evolving, with things like advanced AI on the horizon, you have to wonder, what or who might be next to be granted legal personhood? It's a question the law is definitely going to have to face. Thanks for joining this explainer.